speaker. Dr. Kevin Anderson has a PhD in microbiology from Kansas State University. He studied as a National Institute of Health postdoctoral fellow at the University of Illinois. He's a professor, or was a professor, of microbiology at Mississippi State University. He was a research, or is, I don't know, are you currently? Research microbiologist for U.S. Department, okay, has been, for the U.S. Department of Agriculture, editor-in-chief of the Creation Research Society Quarterly, director of the Van Andel Creation Research Center for Creation Research Society. He published more than 20 papers, and he's been a presenter for nationwide and worldwide scientific meetings or get-togethers. In a nutshell, he's a really smart guy, right? He's been at some very prestigious colleges, has worked for the government, pretty impressive stuff. But I think kind of what has stood out to me is that in the world of secular science, he has not only stayed in his faith, but his faith has grown. And that's a real big challenge for you guys as you head off to college and into your adult world. You will be criticized and ridiculed for your faith. And I think Dr. Anderson is a perfect example of you can survive and thrive in a hostile environment when you stay grounded in your faith. So without any further ado, I'd like to introduce Dr. Kevin Anderson. Give him a very warm welcome
Thank you very much, and thank you for taking a break from your class, because I know you'd rather be in class, right? Yes. Of course you do, yeah. Actually, right now I work for the Creation Research Society full-time. I have essentially retired out of the secular community, and I'm doing full-time research for the Creation Research Society, which is a Christian organization dedicated to defending the Word of God as scientists, and it's composed of scientists and non-scientists and also students. We have literature on the table back there. Also the Denver Creation Society, which is a local group, has literature back there. So as you're leaving to go to the talent show, please pick up some literature. Now, if you're going to pick it up, please promise to read it. But we do have literature back there that hopefully you would find of interest, not only about the society, but some of the claims and some of the arguments that we make. All right, this is what the world's going to say. Oh, the debate's over. Bible's wrong. God's dead. It's all done. Debate's over. And you go into a scientific establishment. You go to Harvard University. You go to a scientific meeting. You'll be scoffed at if you make comments like, this is what the Bible says, or this is what God did. Come on, that's just only ignorant, backwards people believe that. So in their view, see, the debate's over. The reason they want the debate to be over is because they don't want to debate. Because you know what? They lose in the debates. And they lose big time. So what do you do when you lose the debate? You just don't want to debate. So how do you keep from debating? Well, the debate's over. We won by default because we're not going to debate. That's how we won. So that's what you're going to be told. But I guarantee you, the debate is not only far from over, it's only beginning. All right. Here we have an invisible rope. And when you put an invisible rope across a sidewalk in a public area like a park, all right, and then you have your accomplice go over to show people the invisible rope, then what happens? People come along and they say, oh, there's an invisible rope here. I guess I better step over it. It's an invisible rope. But I step over it. Oh, I don't think I can step over that rope. I might trip. So I'm going to go around the invisible rope. Or I'm not sure I can make it over that rope. That might be too hard to make it over the invisible rope. May I be allowed to pass through without? So I negotiate with the invisible rope holding people. Some more people coming along. Oh, there's an invisible rope here. I better make sure that I step over it. And I need to wait for the other people to step over the invisible rope. And then tell my children to make sure you step over the invisible rope. Or I'm not sure I can make it by that invisible rope, so let's just go the other way. I don't know if I can go over the invisible rope, so please explain to me how I can get over this invisible rope. I don't understand how to proceed further. Say, oh, can I make it just by simply stepping over? Oh, okay, all right. So, let's see. What are they stepping over? Nothing. Why are they stepping over? Nothing. Because everyone else did. Exactly. That's what they were told to do. It's what they saw everyone else doing. It's called herd mentality. It happens everywhere. It happens obviously in high school. It happens in college. It happens in professional circles, scientific circles. Herd mentality. Everyone else is doing it. I guess I'll do it too. Remember this. Remember this. Are you stepping over an invisible rope simply because that's what everyone else does, even though the rope isn't there? I am a Christian. I am a scientist. And most bizarre of all, I am a creationist. I'm what the world tells you doesn't exist. But you know what? There's a lot of us out there. There's a lot more than what you're going to be led to believe by watching the news and reading online. In fact, let me give you this tip of advice that's going to come as a big surprise to you. Don't believe everything you read on Google. And don't believe everything you see on TV. In fact, I would say believe very little you read on Google and see on TV. Because the world wants you stepping over this invisible rope. That's what the world wants you to do. It wants you stepping over this invisible rope. Because if you're stepping over the invisible rope, you're not making waves. You're not doing that Christian stuff and getting in the way. Just fall in line to step over the rope. And the scientific community is that way too. Just shut up about all your Christian creation stuff. That's just all nonsense. Step over the rope and keep going. From my perspective, a godless world history makes no sense to me. A godless worldview makes no sense to me. I cannot understand the history of this planet and the history of humankind in a godless setting. It makes no sense to me. I cannot understand the world around me in a godless view. It makes no sense to me. The only way I can make sense of anything is I got to put God front and center. If God's not front and center, nothing makes sense. And when nothing makes sense, then that's when you fall into confusion. And that's when you just start deciding to step over the invisible rope because that's what everyone else is doing. You got nothing else to do. Don't know any better. I'm going to challenge that Christianity is the only view that offers a personal relationship with your Creator. First off, if you don't believe in a Creator, then obviously you're not a Christian, but clearly you don't have a personal relationship with that Creator because you don't believe in that Creator. But all of the other teachings, whether it be Hinduism, whether it be Islam, whatever it is, they don't offer a personal relationship. At most, they offer a very distant relationship. Only Christianity offers you a relationship with your Creator. How awesome is that? A personal relationship. Jesus said that God knows the very number of hairs on your head. In other words, He knows more about you than you can possibly know about yourself. Christianity is the only view that offers an explanation for both good and evil. If there is no lawgiver, then how do you know what good and evil even is? People say, well, how can you believe in God that allows evil? Well, if we're saying there's evil, then how do you know there's good? Because to know what evil is, you have to know what good is, where the good comes from. And that means you have to have some kind of moral basis to make a distinction between good and evil. If you have a moral basis, that comes from a moral lawgiver. Otherwise, you're just making it up. And I can declare what's evil in my own eyes, and that's what humans do all the time. Oh, that's not evil. I can shoot you if I want if I determine it's not evil. If there's no lawgiver, I can make up my own rules. So if you're saying something's evil, then that means you must have something to tell you what good is to know what it is evil. Where does our idea of where good come from? It comes from our moral law. Where does the moral law come from? It comes from the lawgiver. So you have to automatically include God in the equation, even know what evil is. Christianity is the only view that offers hope. There's no other view. Hinduism, Buddhism, Islam, they really don't offer any hope. I've talked to many, many Muslims, and they will admit they don't know what Allah is going to do with them. They have no idea. They don't really have hope. If you're practicing many of the different Eastern religions, the best you can hope for is maybe be reincarnated as a cow, a cockroach. That's hope. And if all goes really well, at some point in time, you just join the very impersonal ether. And you just kind of dissolve away. That's hope. That's all they offer. Why would we even attracted to that? What would attract us to that? See, Christianity is offering you a hope beyond yourself. It's offering you a personal relationship with your Creator. And Christianity is the only one that portrays what I call a real God. The rest of them are fake gods. God really wouldn't do that. God really wouldn't be that way. You think about Jesus. Born to very humble parents in a very humble setting, the first visitors he had were shepherds, the low end of the economic pole. What's that tell you? That tells you that the real God will reach down to anybody and everybody. All the other views out there have gods that won't be bothered with the poor. Why do you think that in India you have the poor and the segments of society that you can't even move out of? It's because, see, in their views, you're stuck where you're stuck, and that's where God puts you, and He doesn't care. See, only Christianity, God says, I'm going to reach down to the very lowest parts of humanity first. First. That's a real God. That's what God would really do. Okay, I have a quiz for you. Say, school, how could you not have a test? Come on, gotta have a test. It's cool. All right, question number 1. How do you get an elephant into a refrigerator? You open the door and you put him in. So I didn't say it had to be a hard test. Okay, all right, you open the door, you put him in. Okay, question number 2. How do you get a giraffe into a refrigerator? Well, first you got to take the elephant out. See, because there wouldn't be room for both of them. Then you put the giraffe in. All right. Question number 3. Okay. The lion, the king of the jungle, calls for a meeting of all of the jungle animals. And all of them attend except which one? The giraffe. Right, the giraffe, because he's still stuck in the refrigerator because you wouldn't let him out. Okay. Question number 4. You need to cross a crocodile-infested river. How can you do that? You can just swim across because, see, the crocodiles are at the meeting with the lion. Now, I do that to show the interconnection of questions. And you'll encounter this your whole life. How you answer one question will directly impact how you answer the next, and the next, and the next. You in your life are coming to a point where you're getting ready to make some of the most important decisions you'll ever make the rest of your life. And some of we older people can say, boy, I wish we knew then what we know now. Recognize the choices, the answers you give to those very important questions are going to be connected to the rest of your life. They're not going to be in a vacuum where you make that decision and then it just disappears. where you go to college, who you marry, what career you decide to do, what you decide to do with your faith and relationship with God, or if you even have a faith and relationship with God, are all going to be questions that are going to impact you the rest of your life. All right. The Bible explains where we come from. Now, you'll hear a lot of answers in the world of where we come from. They're not going to be the answers the Bible gives, but you give a lot of answers. The Bible also answers why we're here. But these aren't questions that are disconnected. In fact, they're very heavily connected, because where you came from tells you why you're here. If I'm here because there's just some random cosmic explosion that just started everything, then why am I here? For no reason whatsoever, because random cosmic explosions have no reason. So there's no reason for me to be here. So what is my purpose in life? I don't have a purpose. So if I get depressed, I'll just take a gun and go to school and start shooting people. And that's what happens. And I don't care how many laws government passes. I don't care how many legislative bills are introduced. I don't care what humans do. They're not going to stop it. Because until we understand where we came from, we don't know our purpose, and therefore we're lost, and we wander around, and we do all kinds of terrible things. Because there's very few things that are worse in the human mind than having no purpose. And the Bible also tells us where we're going. Not just where we're going at the end of our life, but where we're going this afternoon, where we're going tomorrow, where we're going in the future of our life. That all relates back to where we came from, why we're here, and where our purpose is. If I understand my purpose, then I understand where I'm going. If I don't understand where my purpose is, then I don't know where to go. If I'm a cosmic accident, then I have no reason of being here, so therefore I have no purpose, so I'm not going anywhere. And so I just then melt down into a puddle of self-pity, doubt, remorse, depression, and maybe take it on others. But the Bible offers answers to all things. Where I came from, why I'm here, what is my purpose in life, and where I'm going. For many Christians, though, unfortunately, they cannot answer those questions, because to them the Bible is just like software license. You don't really read it, you just scroll down, click I agree, and you move on. But if you haven't read it, how do you know you agree? And unfortunately, all too many Christians, they couldn't tell you what the Bible says. They may agree with it, but they don't really know if they agree with it or not, because they haven't read it. So my first challenge to you is read the Bible. And then read it again. And read it again, and read it again. I've been reading the Bible my whole life, and I am absolutely astounded. The 20th time I read Romans, I got more out of it than the first 19 times. The 20th time I read Hebrews, I got more out of it than the first 19 times. Because it's the Word of God. It's not just static words. It has life, it has meaning, and as you grow and as you move through life, suddenly you'll see things like, when did that get put in there? I don't remember that sentence being in there before. That's the power of the Word of God. Read it, read it, read it again. Don't just click I agree. Read it and then agree. If we take all the chapters of the Bible and we connect them with other chapters of the Bible that reference them, this is what we get. See, if the Bible was just simply a product of man, you wouldn't have all this interconnection, because that's not how humans write. But because God was the ultimate author of the Bible, you have all this interconnection where there's no one part of the Bible that's not connected to all the other parts of the Bible. So what part of the Bible can we just leave out? Say, well, it's not important. Because we've got to recognize this massive interconnection. One chapter to another chapter to another chapter. Having a good time over there. And this isn't just some goofy, biased Christian. This was from National Geographic. So they acknowledge the interconnection that we see in the Bible. Now, you're going to be told a lot. It's science versus the Bible. You can't believe that silly, backward, outdated Bible stuff. We believe in science. We're scientists. We're in a scientific age. Get with the program. Step over the invisible rope and move on. Shut up. Just keep going. It's not science versus the Bible. I promise you it's not. I've been a practicing scientist my whole life. And what I've found is these arrows go the same way. They go the same way. And it's not a matter of I've somehow had to reconcile my biblical faith with scientific teaching. True scientific teaching, as we're going to show here in just a second, true scientific teaching in the Bible, they point the same direction, beautifully so. Now, because I refuse to step over the invisible rope, I get called a lot of names. My colleagues get called a lot of names. That's the way the world responds. Well, why did you step over the rope? The rest of us did. You think you're better than us, huh? You probably never heard that before, right? Right? You've probably heard some of these also. You can't be a Christian and be a scientist. You can't be a Christian in the face of all the scientific facts. You can't be a competent scientist to believe in Genesis. There's nothing in biology that makes sense if you don't put it in terms of evolution. You've got to put all this stuff in there. You can't say you're a scientist, a Christian, and a creationist. That doesn't work, according to the world. According to those that are going to be constantly telling you to step over the invisible rope. We also then, as a product of that, get what we call the face. You're what? You're a, they can barely even say it sometimes, a Christian? A creationist? Because again, they can't comprehend how you could be a scientist and believe in that Bible stuff. But my challenge is, what else would you expect a fallen world to say? Remember, when the world turned against God, it turned against God because it decided that it knew better. I know better than God. When the world turns against God, then it's no longer interested in the evidence of God. The first chapter of Romans talks about that man denies all the evidence for God. It's there, but they just deny it. If you remember, Jesus raised Lazarus from the dead. I hope you remember that. Right? A few days after Jesus raised Lazarus from the dead, Lazarus was walking in the streets of Jerusalem, and the religious leaders that were all critics of Jesus, wanting to kill him, saw Lazarus walking. They didn't go, oh wow, look at that. That's evidence that Jesus has power over the grave. That's evidence that Jesus is the Messiah. That's not what they did. So they didn't care about the evidence. The world tells you, oh, we deal in facts. No, it doesn't. The world deals in a fiction, in a fantasy. Step over the invisible rope and move on. What the religious leaders did then is they said, we need to kill Lazarus and Jesus. Look at buried evidence. So don't be fooled when the world says, oh, I take just science fact. No, you don't. You don't care about fact. You just care about stepping over the invisible rope and moving on. See, it's not a matter of, okay, let's take a popular vote, Bible yes or no, okay, the no's win, so no Bible. That's not how it works. Truth has never been based on popularity. In fact, Jesus said, if you're going to follow me, you're not going to be popular. If popularity is all you're all about, then Jesus is not the way, because you're not going to be popular. But if having hope, having meaning, having peace in your life is what you're about, then Jesus is the only way. And remember, Jesus said, the light is the gate, and many are on it to go to destruction. See, the popular view has never been Jesus' view. Okay, so this brings us then, if we're talking about the science and the Bible, supposedly they're in conflict, the first thing we have to do is we have to understand, well, what is science? Because a lot of people, including, unfortunately, a lot of scientists, have a confused idea of what science even is. Well, want to offer me their understanding of what science is? Any takers? I heard I got some biochemistry students in here. Is that true? No? Yes? No? Don't admit it? Okay, why do you make series and testing? That's kind of getting there. Yes?
It's the understanding of natural processes.
Okay, I would correct that in the sense that it is a tool to help you understand the world around you. never limit science to natural processes, because when you do that, you automatically say that God can't be part of science. And where's that come from? That comes from the world telling you, you got to step over the invisible road. Science is a tool. It's a tool to try to understand God's creation. Now, as a tool, does science offer a voice? When you hear science says the Bible's wrong, what's that really mean?
To me?
Yeah.
Well, I think that science and Scripture actually go hand in hand. In fact, I think that a lot of science today is misunderstood.
Okay. Let's expand on that a little bit. Okay. If someone says, if you read a headline and it says, science has disproven the Bible, did science really disprove the Bible? Because what is science? It's a tool. It's a tool to understand. We use that tool to interpret. So what you're really reading is that an interpretation by a fallible human says the Bible's wrong. That's all science is. Science doesn't say anything. That'd be like your hammer saying something. And that'd be a little freaky. Okay. Science is simply a tool. Science says nothing. Now, scientists who are trained to use that tool, they say a lot. Sometimes they say way too much. Okay. So it's really the opinion and interpretation of humans that is making these statements. But see, by saying science says it gives it an authority it doesn't really deserve. And the world responds like, ooh, great science, we bow down to you. Oh. If you worship science, then please don't be a scientist, because you're not going to help us. But if you understand what science is, then please come along for the ride, because we need that. All right. Lawrence Krauss. I don't know if you're familiar with Lawrence Krauss or not. He lives a couple hours south of me at Arizona State University. One of the most outspoken atheists in the United States, at least today. And he has stated that every atom in your body came from a star that exploded. So forget Jesus, the stars died so that you could be here today. And that's, ooh, oh, wow, that's so wonderful and so moving. No, it's not. It's just plain ignorant. There's not in fact, this is not only not scientific, it's anti-science. Let me explain to you why. Because Lawrence Krauss is assuming that the only way that the elements that are in your body, the iron, the nickel, the cobalt, the carbon, the nitrogen, the only way they could get there is from an exploding star, which already making a big assumption that's been totally unproven, but he's assuming that they can all somehow come together and make life. And he'll refer to these kind of experiments, we can make life. No, they can't. Those experiments are all nonsense. Utter nonsense. So when they have it in the biology books, they have it in the chemistry books, and Lawrence Krauss is talking about how stars exploded so that you could be here, there's not a shred of scientific evidence for that. It is completely unscientific to say that. In fact, I consider much higher authority, and that's James Tour. In the world today, James Tour is one of the foremost synthetic chemists. If anybody would know how to put molecules together to make life, he would know it. And he has said, quote, those who think scientists understand the issues of prebiotic chemistry are wholly misinformed. Nobody knows. Nobody. He would take Lawrence Krauss's comment and he'd say, that is absurd. Lawrence, you don't know anything. In fact, here's the thing with Lawrence. Lawrence always wants to back up and say, I don't accept the Bible, I accept science. No, you don't accept science. You accept an interpretation using a brain you say once belonged to a monkey, which Charles Darwin even said, how can we trust such a brain? So all he has is an interpretation based on his atheism. He doesn't have science. He misuses science. And we see that in the world a lot. He not only wants to step over the invisible rope, he wants to jump rope over the invisible rope. Okay, here's what science, it's called the law of biogenesis. Life only comes from life. And we have proven that over and over and over. In fact, I would say it is the most fundamentally proven law in all of science. And you know what that is? That's creation. But you can't call it that in a scientific setting because, oh, no, that's evil, that's awful. But that's what it is, it's creation. So it's, no, you're not a product of an exploding star. You're a product of life. Where did that life come from? Other life. Where did that life come from? It came from the ultimate life giver, a creator. So, in the future, if scientists find that they can take some molecules and wrap them together and slowly somehow work it all together and make life using all their knowledge of chemistry, all their knowledge of biology, what's it really going to prove? What you're going to read in the headlines is going to prove that no intelligence was needed to begin with. What you've really proven is the opposite. You needed an enormous amount of intelligence. So the world's still wanting to jump over the invisible rope, even when it's disproven the rope is there. Okay, we understand and recognize the popular view is what is called evolution. Now, I'm going to specifically define evolution because evolutionists don't like to define it, which always amuses me, because I challenge that they recognize the moment they define it, they lose. Because they know once defined, they have to defend it. And they don't want to defend it. But here's a portion of what they're talking about. Here's a portion of what they're talking about. This is where you came from, according to the popular views. You know, the 4 questions. Where did I come from? Why am I here? What's my purpose? Where am I going? Okay. Where did I come from? This is what they're going to say, where you came from. Now, let's contrast that just a second with biblical teaching. Biblical teaching says that God made you from dirt, not from a primate. Biblical teaching says that God made woman from man's rib. And biblical teaching says you were made in God's image, not the image of a primate. It's no wonder when taught this, that we think, well, we're just another animal. Because that's what we're being taught. And if we're just another animal, then what is my purpose? What's my point? What's my function? I might as well behave like another animal. And if you watch the evening news, you find a lot of people take exactly that, and just behave like another animal. Let me do just a little bit of exposure of why that picture I just showed you of all those steps is not true. Okay, in your body you have billions of cells. And in the cells, each cell has a nucleus containing your chromosomes. And chromosomes are made up of DNA. But you also have in your cells little structures called organelles, and some of those organelles are called mitochondria. And mitochondria also contains DNA. Very small, about 16,000 letters, very small, but it also contains DNA. Now, as DNA, then that means it's subject to mutation. Mutation just being you're changing the letters. It's subject to mutation like any piece of DNA is subject to. Right? You may not like it, but the truth of the matter is you have about 100 more mutations than your parents. And they have 100 more mutations than their parents, and on and on and on. Mitochondrial DNA is also subject to those same mutations. Not as many, but it's also, because it's small, but it's also subject to mutations. Mitochondrial DNA is passed from female to her children. Goes through the woman, not the man. Because of that, we can establish lineages based on mitochondria. We can establish mitochondrial trees. We have a great-grandma to her child, to her daughters, their daughters, then their daughters, and on and on. So we can follow your lineage through your mom, your grandma, your great-grandma, your great-great-grandma, your great-great-great-grandma. We can keep going back and back and back. And in fact, that's exactly what was done in 1987. They followed it all the way back, and they found out, you know, there comes a point in time where all mitochondrial DNA converges in one woman. Isn't that interesting? The Bible tells us we all came from one woman. And we have, even in the scientific literature, this is published in the journal Nature, which is certainly not Bible-friendly by any way, shape, or form. We all came from one woman. They acknowledge that. Now, they're not saying that she was the only woman alive at the time. They don't have proof that there was other women. They just can't allow she'd be the only woman because that'd be too biblical. But they will acknowledge she was the only woman whose mitochondrial DNA has survived to today. So we're all descendants from the same woman. That's genetically, no geneticist denies this. I don't, even the most rabid atheist out there doesn't deny this. Now, what they did though was said, okay, how long ago did she live? So they took the mutation rate of the mitochondria, then they put in what I call an evolutionary fudge factor. And they come up with an age of 150,000 years. Okay? They call her mitochondrial Eve. It wasn't really out of respect of Eve, it was just a joke, but it still allows us to talk about Eve. Okay? They said she lived 150,000 years ago. So they would point to someone like me and say, see, we acknowledge that we all came from this mitochondrial Eve, but she's way too old for your view. Well, I'd say, yeah, but you use this fudge factor to make that date. And the fudge factor, would anyone want to guess what they did? They put in chimpanzee mitochondrial DNA into the calculations also. And your first question should be, why? And the answer is, because that's the only way that you get this state. In other words, they had to cheat. They had to assume evolution, force it in there, and then that gave them the date. Now, if we go to the rest of the story, we pull out the chimpanzee mitochondrial DNA and just simply go with the raw data, the evidence, not the invisible rope, the evidence. The rate of mutation in human mitochondrial DNA, starting from the mitochondrial Eve to us. Eve is 7,500 years old. And they knew that. That's why they put the chimpanzee DNA in there. Why they did that. In fact, in 1998, in a publication, again in the journal Science, they admitted that using the new clock being where we've taken the mitochondrial DNA of the chimpanzee out, they acknowledged, well, Eve would just be a mere 6,000 years old. And, oh, that's way too biblical, so that's obviously not acceptable. And so the rest of the article is focused on explaining why we got to come up with a new explanation. Because we certainly can't have Eve just living 6,000 years ago. That's not going to work. But yet, the science is Eve, we all came from one woman, and she lived 6,000 to 7,000 years ago. That's the science. If you want science, there it is. We're done, we can go home. That's it. Nobody denies this. But they still want you to keep jumping over the invisible rope because it doesn't fit what they want you to believe. I have a friend that published in 2007 in the Journal of Nucleic Acid Research where he's done more work than the 1987 study and got even closer to the original sequence of Eve. And he thinks he's gotten down to 99.99% of Eve's original mitochondrial DNA sequence. And so with that data, what we have is here's our mitochondrial DNA lineage tree for humans. We contemporary humans are the ones out here on the points. Like once you go back in time, great-grandma, great-great-grandma, keep going back, and you come to a point then where the mitochondrial DNAs begin to converge. Now, here's Eve. It's where she falls. See, so some of us have mitochondrial sequences much closer to her than others of us have. But there's also 3 more women on here. And this is where they are on the tree. Any guess who those women are? Noah's daughter-in-laws. Because remember, Noah's wife just had sons. So her mitochondrial DNA would have stopped. But the daughter-in-laws now become the new mothers, genetically speaking, of all mankind. And so here's their breakpoints right there. We can put them on the human tree and show where they are. Yes, we're that good. The evolutionists want to take this tree and expand it way out and say, oh, but this is hundreds of thousands of years ago. But see, remember, they put the fudge factors in. Take those fudge factors out, this is just a few thousand years ago. Beautiful confirmation of that what the Bible says is exactly the history of mankind. That's why I said a godless earth history makes no sense to me. Okay, 2004 in the journal Nature. The journal Nature is hardly pro-creation. They published that the genealogical ancestor of all present-day people lived 3000 BC. Now that's a plus or minus. Right? So here we have in the scientific literature the acknowledgement that our genealogical ancestor lived just a few thousand years ago, not hundreds of millions or hundreds of thousands of years ago, but just a few thousand years ago. Okay, so what we currently know about human genetics fits within the Bible and recent creation. And in fact, contradicts what you're going to be told. It contradicts jumping over the invisible road. Well, let's not stop there. Let's keep going. How about dinosaurs in the Bible? I mean, for a lot of people, see, dinosaurs disprove the Bible. So we just hit ignore. We just hit delete. And there goes the Bible. Because dinosaurs. Say dinosaurs in the Bible is supposed to explode. Well, let's again look at that for just a second. Okay? One of the big criticisms you get as well, dinosaurs on the ark. Come on, what a joke. Dinosaurs on the ark, seriously. There wouldn't have been room for them. I mean, gee whiz. That's just, you're just already being goofy when you start talking about that. Well, let's stop and put some thought behind it. Okay? Act as a scientist for a second. The first thing we need to recognize is that dinosaurs came from eggs. The biggest dinosaur egg ever found is 12 inches, approximately 12 inches in length. And there's a physiological reason for that. You see, the hatchling of any egg breathes oxygen from the atmosphere through the shell. They have to breathe. If you get the egg much bigger than a foot, the shell has to become so thick that the oxygen can't permeate in and the hatchling would suffocate. So even the largest dinosaurs, even the massive ones that were over 100 feet in size when they were fully mature, started out this big. I don't think that's that big a challenge for Noah to even pick one of those up and carry it on the ark. Do you? They weren't going to take up much space, they weren't going to take up much food. And why would you take much bigger ones? Because you're wanting creatures that when they get off the ark, they have their full life of reproduction in front of them. There's no reason to take one of the great big ones on. They're probably old and cranky, won't even reproduce anymore. See, so you take one of the small ones that don't give any space, but they fit your purpose exactly what you need. So critically think and discern when you get these claims about, oh, this is impossible, that's impossible. People haven't even thought about some of this before. Just stop and think about it. Okay? People say, well, dinosaur is not in the Bible. Well, first off, the word dinosaur was not even invented until 1841. So you wouldn't expect it to appear in any document until 1841. Now, subsequent translators of the Bible haven't used the word dinosaur because, see, they're still jumping over the invisible road. They're not going to defy the invisible road, so they're not going to put dinosaur in, even though it ought to be in there. They're not going to put it in there. Okay? There's a Hebrew word called tenium. It appears 14 times in the Old Testament. And the most correct translation of it is, this is a great monster. It's typically translated as dragon. Well, of course, people scoff. Well, dragon, such a thing as a dragon, fire-breathing, flying. That's not what it's talking about. That's not what the translators of King James are even talking about. They were talking about some kind of great creature. Okay? It's often translated as sea monster or serpent. Anymore, in some of the more modern translations, they translate it as Jekyll. Where does that come from? That's just strictly, that's totally made up. Okay? The book of Job, 40th chapter, Behemoth, gives a nice long description. Among the description is it has strength in its loins, its power, has a powerful belly muscles, it has a tail like a cedar. These would be Lebanon cedars. These are massive cedars. Okay? It has bones of bronze. It's the first among God's works. Remember, the whole point of what God's talking to Job about is God is explaining his creation. Saying, Job, look at the creation and fall in awe to me. And so what God is doing is pointing out, first of creation, in other words, this is not some scrawny little dude, this is massive creature. And guess what, Job? You can go down to the Jordan River and still see it. still alive today. Right? And can anyone trap it? See, if you look in the footnotes of your Bible, it'll say like hippopotamus, elephant. You know what? Elephants and hippopotamuses are so easily trapped that they're on the verge of extinction. So I don't think that would really fit, that can anyone trap it. Plus, I've never seen an elephant with a tail that would look like a cedar. That's not what would come to mind when you think of an elephant, or a hippopotamus, or a rhinoceros tail. So clearly God is describing something that doesn't fit those animals. In 2005, a paper was published in the journal Science, subsequently followed very quickly 2 years later by 2 more papers, where they reported that in the fossilized femur of a Tyrannosaurus rex, they found stretchable, pliable tissue with pieces of proteins. Again, I have some biochemistry students here. If you understand proteins, you recognize proteins decay fairly rapidly, especially when they're outside of their normal living host. They begin to break down very quickly. And yet here we have a fossil that is claimed by the world, claimed by the scientific community, that this fossil is almost 70 million years old, and it's still got squishable, pliable tissue, and it still has proteins in it. More recent work has even extracted blood vessels from dinosaur fossils. Squishy, pliable blood vessels in dinosaur fossils that contain a wide variety of fragments of different kinds of proteins. Again, proteins that would not last millions and millions of years. Okay, I've done some work, of course, working for the Creation Research Society. We started a project we call iDino. And in this, our focus was to also investigate this soft tissue. One of the fossils we looked at was a large Triceratops horn. And from that large Triceratops horn, tissue was extracted. This is on the Journal of American Laboratory. See, to tell you creationists don't publish. Here's a living example right here that we do. Right? This is squishable, pliable tissue. And you guess what these are? These are bone cells. So you're looking at dinosaur tissue containing cells. Here is more bone cells. We published this in the journal ATC Histochemistry. Here is a vertebra of the decimal sorts. My technician last summer was just scraping along, and all of a sudden, here we go. And she starts pulling. There it is. And after we got it pulled off, this is the slab of tissue she pulled off. One of them. So you can throw that on a grill and grill it up. A dinosaur burger. This is dinosaur tissue from fossils that are supposed to be over 65 million years old. The evolutionist community is still scrambling to explain this stuff. My challenge is, what it shows is simply, these fossils are not that old. They're not tens of millions of years old. Much more consistent interpretation is these fossils are just a few thousand years old at most. Okay? Design. We would understand design in that if we see even something like a table, we knew that somebody designed and built that table. It just didn't fall into place on its own. And yet here we have Francis Crick. If you remember, if you've studied biology, Francis Crick and James Watson were the ones that first put together the chemical structure of DNA, first elaborated what it was. Francis Crick was also an atheist. See, so Francis Crick has to have some other explanation than what we're talking about, what I'm talking about. He said biologists must constantly keep in mind that what they're seeing was not designed, but rather evolved. In other words, it's so obvious it was designed, you have to keep reminding yourself. It's so obvious the rope is there, or excuse me, it's so obvious the rope is not there, you have to keep reminding yourself to jump over the rope. That's what he's saying. Because if you forget, then you might walk through the rope and not jump over it. If you forget, you might think, hey, this is design. Wow. Oh, wait a minute, stupid me. No, it can't be designed, it had to be evolved. See, so I've got to keep constant. So what's that telling you already? What's the scientific data telling you? Scientific data is telling you it's designed. Because you shouldn't have to keep reminding yourself that it's not designed. Shouldn't have to if that was the scientific data. But the approach that has been taken is, oh, it's no big deal. Designed life, that's no big deal at all. It's easy, it's child's play. Life can just pop up all over the place. Even though, of course, we have no idea how, as we just talked about. But somehow it had to pop up all over the place. Because otherwise it becomes a big deal and then we've got a problem. So we have to diminish, we have to dismiss it. It's not a big deal, not a big deal. In fact, in 2005 in cell biology, they even challenged that there's many systems we see that are overly complex. Isn't that interesting that some random sorting process made something overly complex, and they use that then as an example that overly complex becomes poor design. I can say right now, because my training is in electrobiology, and I have done electrobiology research for several decades. There's no such thing in the biological world as over complex. It generally is we just don't understand all the complexity there. In fact, what we find is it's often even more complex, and there's a reason why it's more complex. So it's not a matter of poor design because it's over complex. It's a matter of human ignorance because we don't know what all this design does. We take, and I say, simple cell, because that's what you're told, simple cell, nothing big to it. You have, of course, the nucleus, the chromosomes are in the nucleus, you have all kinds of organelles, the endoplasmic reticulum, the Golgi body, the mitochondria, which we were just talking about. In the, quote, simple cell, remember your body is made up of billions of these. So your body as a whole is much more complex than any single cell. Yet any single cell, if as a researcher I choose to study one small aspect of this cell, I can spend my entire research career on that one single small aspect and still have more questions when I'm done than I had when I started. And we call that simple. There's nothing simple about that at all. It's extraordinarily sophisticated. Okay, let's use an example. Let's use an analogy. In genetics, 20 years ago, we thought we understood it. And then we began to study it at a level much deeper than what we were originally studying it at. Okay? In doing that, we began to realize we don't understand it after all. You've heard the term gene, G-E-N-E, gene in DNA, the gene in genetics. We now recognize we don't know what a gene is. Oh, we still use the term because we don't have any other term to talk about. But we don't know what a gene is anymore because the gene is so much more sophisticated than what we thought it was. And so what we have is a situation where genetics has now become so complicated, not that we were wrong in our understanding 20 years ago, but we were so incomplete. We only stood very, very small portions of it. If we took the chromosomes in your body and we said, let's make an analogy, that the chromosomes in your body are like taking this 6-volume set of books and printing them all on 20 pages. But it's not 20 pages of real dinky microscopic print. It's 20 pages of basic readable print. But it's printed in such a way that the entire 6-volume set is on those 20 pages. And the way you read it is you read it left to right, top to bottom, the way you would normally read, but then you turn it over and read it again. Now, how many of you have ever read a book where you turn it over and read it again? There's no book in the world that humans have written that you can do that. But that's not all. Then you take 2 pages and fold them in and read it again. And 2 more pages and fold it in and read it again. And 2 more pages and fold it in again and read it again. And you keep doing that over and over and over and over again until The 20 pages have the entire text of the 6 set books. We don't know how yet to read that book. That's what, as Ministers, we're staring at today. We don't know how to read that. We understand that this is what we're looking at, but we don't know how to read it. We don't know how to fold the pages. We don't know how this is done. We just know that somehow on those 20 pages, the entire 6 books is printed. So we not only don't know how to read it, we certainly don't know how to write it. And yet, here we have a book that we don't even know how to read, let alone write, and yet they're trying to tell you when you go into your science courses that this book wrote itself. That's not only ignorant, that's insane ignorance. We don't know how to write that book. That doesn't mean that book is so easy to write. That means that the intelligence to write that book is so beyond us that we're middle microscopic midgets by comparison. And I only know one explanation for that, and that's God. I don't know any other explanation. Because if you're going to tell me that book wrote itself somehow, I'm going to look at you and say that's the most unscientific thing you could possibly say. I don't know of a bigger unscientific comment you can make than somehow that book wrote itself. Makes no scientific sense whatsoever. The only explanation is an intelligence so beyond ours. And to me, God's the only thing that meets that. All right, you're going to get a lot of misinformation in your life. A lot. Jump over the invisible rope. A lot of misinformation. I don't know if any of you are big Dan Brown fans. He writes some of these novels. The Da Vinci Code, of course, caught a lot of people's attention. Right? He has used this forum to basically promote Darwinism. Be aware of these types of things. Be aware of the kind of information, the misinformation you're going to be thrown at. Read your Bible. Think. Discern. Study. And find a good Bible-teaching church to support you. Whether you're off professional or in college. Think, discern, study, read your Bible. Thank you so much.